Hello, everyone, and welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event, AI for Health Sciences and Biotech. We would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities to examine research questions and projects in development here at Concordia. We are running today's event as a live stream to YouTube and a Zoom meeting. For those of you joining us on Zoom, we welcome your comments and questions with a raised hand or via the chat. And for those of you in the space, we welcome your comments and questions. If you'd like to participate later on, just let us know by raising a hand and we'll get this microphone to you. With that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to entrepreneur in residence at D3, Karina Gasbarrino. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Really excited to be moderating this panel today and explore how AI is having an impact in the health and bio industry. We'll explore what it can do, what it cannot do, and some of the limitations and risks for bringing AI innovations from the lab into real-world applications. We put together for you an incredible panel of speakers that are spanning experts from engineering, biotechnology, physics, venture capitalism, and even neuroinformatics. So we'll start with a quick round of introductions. I'll let them share their background, how AI is connected to their current work, and what inspired or motivated you to work at that intersection between AI and life sciences. So Zoe, if you want to get started.
Perfect. So hi everyone, I'm Zoe. I am AI lead at Bioeureka, which is a biotech startup that was founded in Montreal in 2022. So my role as AI lead is mostly crafting the models, fine-tuning them, deploying them, maintaining them, making sure that they are accurate, and monitoring them throughout the whole process so that our customers are happy. So our product at Bioeureka is basically a platform that is able to identify pathogens using computer vision. So yeah, this is what I do day to day.
Hey, hi everyone, I'm Manon Boisclair. Very happy to be with you. I am a clinician. I used to work at the Montreal Heart Institute. That's where I started my career. I spent more than 25 years in biopharma here in Montreal at Merck, then Novartis, and I was transferred to the global team in the US, so global medical affairs. So launched 5 blockbusters in hemato-oncology at Novartis, Celgene that was acquired by BMS, and then Intercept. Came back a few years ago in Montreal. I'm a dual citizen, and I felt that when I came back, Montreal was no longer what it used to be in bioscience. We had a lot of headquarters, a lot of R&D, and we lost that, but what we didn't lose is the R&D that we have in academia and in smaller companies. So I'm an angel investor with Ange Quebec since 2019. I did about 13 private investment, mainly in biopharma and life science, because that's my sweet spot, so to speak. I'm an LP with Exilia, which is a fund to support female entrepreneurs and people coming from diversity backgrounds. And I'm a GP at Linearis, which is a fund and a lab. We have a lab in Quebec City that does high throughput metabolomic analysis, a huge panel of about 1,800 metabolites. And we're investing in AI life sciences. Why is that important for me? To answer your question, because life science has been dusty for a long time. And I think right now, with the acceleration of AI, this is a unique moment to really accelerate patient care and also the promise to discover better drugs tailored for tackling various diseases. So I'm a mentor at District 3, but also very involved with CDL AI Montreal and CDL Cancer. Happy to be with you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Ray Mansbach. I'm an associate professor in the physics department. I use they, them pronouns. I am maybe the most interestingly questioning person here, so I'm excited to be here for sure, but I think a lot of my thoughts have to do with critical thinking and ethical applications of AI. So as a physicist, I do a lot of work on trying to use deep learning models to speed things up, speed up our modeling procedures, speed up design of biomolecules. But as the child of two humanities people, and as an avid writer, I also spend a lot of time thinking about what do we even mean when we say things like AI? So I think a lot of what I'm excited about, what I want to be here for, is to have that conversation and to think about both the things that we can do and the things that we can't do, but also what do we mean when we use some of these terms, I guess.
Yeah, you can use that one. I think it should work.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Paula Lago. I'm an assistant professor at the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department. And I work on the analysis of wearable and smart home sensor data to analyze behavioral patterns, physiological patterns, and how our behaviors affect health status, health outcomes. And I got interested in this combination because I think, or I believe, that the use of better data analysis can improve access and equity of healthcare if we are careful on how to do it and how to deploy it. I'm also very happy to be having this conversation today.
Hi everyone, very excited to be here. I'm Tristan Glatard. I'm a senior scientist at CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, which is a mental health hospital affiliated with the University of Toronto. I'm also the scientific director of the Krembil Center for Neuroinformatics there, where our goal is to develop and implement AI models, hopefully in the clinic in the coming years. Why I'm interested in this conversation, I think AI has a huge potential with all ethical caveats, of course, but to improve the life of patients and people who suffer from mental health issues. I was also the co-director of the Applied AI Institute here at Concordia up until August 2024, so very close friend of the Institute.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I think it's so inspiring to hear all your diverse backgrounds and also your motivations to being part of this conversation today. We'll definitely dive into the ethical implications, but first let's talk a little bit more about the impact of AI. So from each of your perspectives, and since you're working on it on various different fields, where do you see AI having the biggest impact in your field? And also, what problems do you think that it's not yet well suited to solve? We can start with Manon, if you like.
Yes, so I think, as I've mentioned, AI in life sciences, whether it's patient support at the hospital, or if you think about biopharma, medtech, digital health, as well as diagnostic, these are the 4 pillars of life sciences. For me, it's an acceleration that's completely never seen before in terms of the way we assess molecules, the way we identify the molecules from the get-go, to really go with the mode of disease and accrue patients that really have the best possible outcome to that type of drug. So in the past, when we think about research, what we have from a data standpoint is a human norm. Just to give you an example, blood pressure 120/80 is a human standard. It's not a female standard. Most of the girls have a much lower blood pressure. So how do we do trials nowadays which are, more mixed in terms of data sets and in terms of patients, but also making sure that we're getting the right type of patients? So to me, AI is going to be a game changer, but we have to go back to the quality of the data and the type of the data, because if you're not getting the right type of cohort, Yes, data is great. You can do a lot of analysis. Are you going to get the right outcome? So I'm sure that my colleagues are going to talk a little bit more about that. But what I was also mentioning when I introduced myself is the acceleration that AI is giving us in life science. Giving you an example, mammogram has been the gold standard for diagnosis of breast cancer for decades. It's obsolete. In a lot of places you get, like in Quebec, you get into the national program at 50, it could be 45, it could be 40, depending on provinces. If you see something at the imagery, it means you have it in your body since a long, long time. Could be 10, 15 years. So these gold standards, which are dusty and obsolete, are going to be switched and replaced by liquid biopsies to look at different markers and be able, similar to cholesterolemia, to assess a patient on a yearly basis to see if there's a flag. We're not going to be waiting at 40, 45, 50 at the imagery to get the ball rolling. So for me, AI, better science, is really going to change the way we address some of the disease, but also maintain people healthier longer.
We can maybe pass it to Ray. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I very much agree with the fact that AI is really good at accelerating things. An example in my field, so we actually do a lot of simulations. So we're doing a lot of modeling of how the various drugs maybe could work, how proteins interact with one another. And the primary way that we do that is through molecular dynamic simulations, in which you basically have a whole bunch of different atoms and you're trying to model all of the different forces on those atoms. But traditional methods, you have to play around. I mean, you're going to sacrifice accuracy if you want speed. So that's just the nature of the game. But that means that sometimes there are effects that are very hard to quantify simply because they're longer time scale effects that you can't model given the computational power at hand. And one thing that has been happening recently is people deriving AI algorithms to basically speed up those steps, right? If you already have a lot of data, you can train a model to perform the similar tasks, but much faster. And that gives us access to the ability to model much larger systems. So I think that's an incredibly good use case because it's a case where we already have a lot of data exactly, and we know that that data is high quality. I also think that exactly what you said, which is, I mean, my favorite thing that I'm always saying, which is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't trust your data, you're not going to trust your algorithm on a computer regardless. So
I would like to complement what Manon was saying, and Ray also. I work with wearable data, so it's not only the promise of we will check things on a yearly basis, but on a continuous measurement and continuous longitudinal way. And so one of the things that we may look at and that are being looked at is, can we create personalized patterns of what is normal for you, and then get the deviations. And AI is great at accelerating that and at finding patterns. But it's still a question of what those patterns and deviations mean. What is a significant deviation versus just a normal change in your like normal cycles of aging, of daily variations, of seasonal variations that every human has. And there's also, we can also look at population level, or subgroup patterns. The other limitation, as has been said before as well, is the quality of the data and the comparability of the data, because the algorithms that analyze the wearable sensor data are changing constantly. So the heart rate that we got, for example, a month ago, the algorithm that got that heart rate might change today. So it's no longer comparable apples to apples. So those are the challenges right now, but also the promise that we might be able to check from the personal level and on a continuous.
Yes, so in terms of opportunities of AI in mental health, maybe a few examples. So one which I'm very excited about is chatbots for the delivery of evidence-based psychotherapy. Only a fraction of people who need psychotherapy in Canada, I believe this number is 30%, but don't quote me on that, actually get the care that they need. So there is, I think, a big opportunity to, improve access to care, provide 24/7 access to, evidence-based psychotherapy. Of course, not replacing any human psychotherapist, and we could have this conversation, but I think improving this access to psychotherapy is a big opportunity. The second thing is predictive models around treatment response. Antidepressants, antipsychotics are nowadays very much prescribed on a trial and error basis. So, clinicians try a drug, it works, it doesn't work, a patient comes back, it hasn't worked, side effects in the meantime, etc. And so developing predictive models based on, clinical data, but also genetics data, imaging data, I think is a very important opportunity there as well.
Thank you.
Well, a lot has already been said, and I pretty much agree with everyone. But from my perspective, I mostly use computer vision. So the thing that I am really excited about AI is it's great at recognizing patterns, which in my case is bacteria, but it could be pretty much anything. So this is a big thing that I think AI is great at and will continue to be great at. So it should also improve care, like preventative care, recognize, mammograms earlier, to detect stuff and patterns earlier. Also, it would be great at prediction. So, well, it's kind of the same thing, but for a while I was working at the SHUM Research Center, and we were working on predictive models to kind of detect the risk of aortal aneurysms, but it was mostly occurring in like senior patients, and the benefits of having surgery sometimes were a bit too risky, so we had to predict when the risks outweighed the benefits, basically. And so that was a great way to kind of detect and not put patients through a big surgery when maybe the risks weren't as high as they maybe would have been. So yeah, prevention, earlier prediction, and but as Manon and Ray mentioned, garbage in, garbage out. I still think there are a lot of things that we have to work on the data, because we have a lot of data, but not all of it is usable. A lot has to be cleaned. A lot is kind of on certain parts of the population, and some other are not as represented. So the models that we are crafting maybe would be really great on certain part of the populations, but won't be able to detect maybe some pathologies on certain part of the communities. So we have to keep that in mind. A great AI model basically is 95% data. So we have to make sure that the data we are using is really at the center of everything we are kind of building, so it benefits everyone.
Thank you for that. Ray, you wanted to
I had
chime
a
in?
follow-up question, because I'm sort of maybe the furthest away here from the people using human data. And of course, I know you need a lot of data to train these things, but I'm also half Jewish, and I am therefore kind of nervous around surveillance state kinds of things. So I'm starting to think about not just is the data good, but how do you deal with the potential privacy concerns, particularly with the mega corporations? And how do you deal with the balancing, as you say, getting good data with the people who are going to be the least likely to want to give you that data for those reasons?
I think this is a very good point. And I'm going to tie into what you're doing in terms of expertise. We know that we're using and we love our Strava. We're loving our Oura Ring. We love monitoring our sleep patterns, but we're giving to large corporations a number of data sets about not only how we feel, how we are, but where we are. So the ethical component of that is super important, and Montreal has a huge role to play because the principle of ethical AI comes from here. We're lucky in Canada to have two of the co-founders, Montreal and Toronto, but how can we manage this? Because we all are using AI, we're using platform, we're using ChatGPT, we're using Claude, but how are we using it ethically? And I think it always has to be top of mind, regardless of what we do. So in medicine, physicians, if you are a physician in the room, on a le serment d'Hippocrate, do no harm. I think in AI right now, we would need to have something like that because it's super easy to go left field and to really infringe on people's privacy because we don't read all of the text and current access, but also from a researcher standpoint or from an operator standpoint, how do we support the best principle possible? I think it's a moral question, an ethical question. I would like to hear your thoughts about this.
I agree, this is a great question, and I agree there are huge risks, especially on the passively collected data, that we are not even aware sometimes that we are giving away this huge amount of data, and that, as you say, huge corporations not only have access to my data, but a lot of people's data, so they can really understand more patterns that we are aware of. And just as an example, I was just reading, for example, that there was a study showing that Meta showed teenagers more ads and beauty ads when they know they are feeling not good about themselves, just because they can understand, for example, they deleted a selfie. If they also have access to the data about our, let's say, stress response, if you're depressed, if you're with a huge accuracy, that can be very risky, it will be very risky. So in research, at least, and of course this is like, there are many issues, right? But at least my view on what I try to do in research is keep the data on the user. So can we analyze the data on your device, that it doesn't travel and it doesn't go away to the corporation? And that's why I'm very interested in personal patterns. Like, can we do something with just your data? But this needs a lot of, let's say, thinking and transdisciplinary work, because who will pay for that? Like, of course, there's always a question of, like, a lot of companies go out of sustainability, let's say, economical sustainability. I think, for example, if AI is going to play a role, there should be like policies to give everyone access, not only the people who can afford it, to keep data private and really good use of it. And definitely it's something that in academia we are well positioned to do, because we don't have these economic interests, at least at some point. And there are other ways, for example, of, well, for now, like analyzing the data, on keeping the data on the user and letting the user be the owner of the data. That comes also with a lot of education, right? Because always, like, you have this privacy consents and information, and we always scroll, accept, and you don't know what you're accepting. So it needs to have both like a lot of education, awareness of how this data can be used, and also like researching ways and models on how can we keep this data private and without losing the benefits, like a risk assessment. Like when do the benefits or the risk outweighs the benefits?
I'd love to also get your perspective, Tristan, because you work in a highly sensitive field of mental health. And
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for that. So maybe two quick things. I think on the academic side, we often underestimate the skills, the expertise of research ethics boards. We actually have, very strong, regulations, rules around the use of clinical and research data, and that apply 90% to AI. So maybe to give a few examples, but things like how do we identify clinical data, including clinical notes? What are the right methods to do that? What's the level of the identification which is acceptable to train an AI model? Are there risks? When we train models on de-identified data, what are the risks if these models become public? That kind of thing. So I think research ethics boards like this relationship is not often mentioned in society, but there's lots of good thoughts coming from that. That's number one. And the second thing is, I think there's always a trade-off between utility and privacy, or let's say benefits, potential health benefits, and then privacy risks. And I think it's important that hospitals keep control of this trade-off and keep, remain part of the discussion. Recently, we've seen in some countries clinical data being sold to private companies, which I think is for many reasons. Privacy is one, but also just economical benefits for the hospital itself is a mistake. I think hospitals should remain in control of their data and possibly allow research partnerships or other partnerships with company to use the data at the hospital under some certain conditions and strict conditions, but certainly not to just offload and lose control of the data. So keeping control of the data in particular in academic hospitals, I think is very important.
I just wanted to kind of say my piece too. So before coming to Montreal, I was working in Germany for a while, and the perspective on data privacy is really at the core of everything there. And they had a saying that in North America, basically they innovate, in Asia they copy, and in the EU, basically they regulate everything. So there they have the AI Act. And so I was working on data privacy at a major company and how to correctly encrypt data to make sure that it was not hackable by quantum computers, AI, whatever. And it was, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. And so ChatGPT didn't exist yet. And it was before the big AI boom. And it was something that they were thinking like ahead. And they were putting a lot of money and research into how to correctly encrypt data to make sure that it would stay private, because they saw like the consequences of how that could potentially be dangerous for patients and basically anyone that was interacting with basically any type of platform now. And so the perspective on data privacy was really different from here, I feel. But I was actually really surprised when I came to Montreal, seeing how the community here is really, there are a lot of researchers and a lot of academics that are really focused on ethics and how to craft models that are as private as possible, or pretty, how would you say that? That we're processing the data in a safe way for the users and for everyone that was involved in this. And I think this is something that we should really still focus on, and there's a lot to do about that. But yeah, different parts of the world kind of think of it a different way, and that's interesting. But I was like, the community here in Montreal is really kind of between the EU, I would say, and North America too. So they both innovate and regulate, which is a great environment for startups and research to kind of get going.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we talked about data quality, we talked about data privacy. What about the representation of how data is being collected? Like, what can we do to minimize bias and incorrect conclusions influencing kind of broader care decisions? Anyone can chime in here.
Well, I think I've alluded to that about the example I've given in terms of blood pressure. It's really identifying the sample size or the groups that represents the most conditions and not to be skewed. That leads to access to research, which is a different ballgame in itself, because in urban area, we're more exposed, especially in academic centers, to really offer patients clinical trial programs when we think about healthcare. But if you look outside of the regions, outside of the metropolitan area, very hard to reach. I'm on the board of the Canadian Cancer Society, and what we've done is a platform to help patients know which trials are running coast to coast, because as a patient, you want to know more about your disease when it hits you, but once you are in it, sometimes you need different waves of treatments, different cocktails, or the disease recur at a certain time point. So how to reach out to people, to me, is one element that's important. In Montreal, you will have the beauty of having a very rich ecosystem representing different ethnical group. But if you go outside, it's a little bit more difficult. We might be not getting as high as a representation for First Nation as if we were on the reserves or whatnot. So when we're thinking about collecting data, I think we have to go back to our research questions. What do we want to accomplish? And are we representing people that are affected by this condition when we think about healthcare?
And I also think, I think you're completely right. All of that is absolutely on the nose. I think also on the researcher side, paradoxically, especially as these more complex models become more and more used, we need to bring back more humanities education into STEM. People need to be trained in critical thinking, and they really need to be trained in the ways in which natural language is not mathematics. I love math. And I love programming. And one of the things I actually kind of dislike personally about the use of things like chatbots is that I'm like, well, if I want to program, I already have trouble making sure the computer's doing what I want. I don't want to add another layer of like ambiguity. But that ambiguity is really valuable for many humanities concerns and for communicating with those people that we're trying to communicate with. But researchers, we still kind of undervalue the humanities. We undervalue that communication. We undervalue the comprehension of, reading difficult texts and texts that maybe don't have a single correct answer. And I think part of that is just there's an undervaluation of the humanities. There's a lot of siloing of people straight through science without being like, hey, maybe you should take a course in science fiction. Maybe you should take a course in history. Maybe you should, you know what I mean? So I think that's another angle that kind of maybe complements what you're saying a little bit.
Yeah, if you want to add something as well.
So I also want to add in terms of the data collection, because it's true that if there is not enough representation of all population in the data that we collect, any pattern or anything that we learn is not going to apply to all population. Not a solution, but at least a safeguard is always being very transparent about what data a model was trained with. What was the population, at least the demographic distribution in terms of ethnic, ages, health status, so that we can be more aware of what biases that model may have. Because it is true that collecting data is not easy, and we need to be careful and try to reach as much diversity as possible within the research question. I completely agree with Manon. But also we can be transparent about what was the data and what might be the biases of this model.
Maybe to add to that, so I think we often think of fairness in AI as a technical problem. Like if we get the right data, then the models will be fair. But embedding that in teams, I think is, diversity in the teams that develop AI models, I think is very important. So to your point, Ray, I think we can think of diversity in terms of, different backgrounds. At the Krembil Center, we have an anthropologist who's working with us, and Laura Sexstrom, and the kind of questions that we discuss are really, very different from what we discuss with a, let's say, traditional technical team. I think to your point, Manon, also involving patients and people with lived experience is extremely important. And again, it's a whole different set of questions that you don't get to even discuss if you're not close to that world. Or and finally, links with Indigenous and Métis, I think in Canada in particular, are very important. And there is a whole conversation about, data and data sovereignty to have there too. So,
thank you for that. Yeah, I think you all made great points showing how AI is living within an ecosystem, and we really need to get inputs from all kinds of stakeholder players to really help push that forward. I want to change topic a little bit, and I want to show what happens when AI innovation kind of moves from the lab into real-world applications. And so, Zoe, I'm going to direct this question to you because I think you really work at that intersection. So what has been some of the challenges that you've seen in trying to move something from prototype to deployment? And what do you see as being some of the major barriers to adoption? Because I think we're seeing a lot of progress with AI. There's a lot of tools now, but adoption is still quite slow.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the barriers to adoption that we have been facing is kind of disrupting the workflows as they are. Like in microbiology and labs, there are a lot of processes in place, and they have been for a really long time. And so trying to kind of bring another approach, another way of doing things has been kind of hard. So we try to do a lot of AI kind of introduction, trying to explain to our clients and people that are interacting with our platform what it was trained on, to kind of be transparent about that, try to explain how, not how it works, but like the different stages as to how a prediction is given, try to explain what it can, what it cannot do, and also just critical thinking, like trust your gut. Biologists have been doing that for a really, really long time. And so maybe our models sometimes are wrong. That could happen. We try to mitigate that as much as possible, but you never know. So if something is really not sitting right with you, just don't blindly trust the model. And so trying to bring our models from the lab to production and to like real work environments has been also kind of hard. And we had to put a lot of barriers in place for that, because our models work great in like locally on our laptops and whatever. But when the clients are interacting with them, sometimes they put like the wrong kind of photos, or maybe, I don't know, it gives you an outlier prediction or whatever. And so we had to put a lot of barriers in place, monitor our models constantly. Whenever there's a data drift or a really drop in performance or something, really pull the trigger early. So, I mean, there are a lot of consequences that could happen if we give like a wrong prediction. So we try to be safe as much as possible. So we had to put a lot of guardrails in place to make sure that they are like, we are safe, and that the clients also kind of can begin to trust our product a little bit before reaching like total adoption. That's it.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
So from an investor standpoint, we tend to invest in Series A, Series B, and in Linearis. But from a coach standpoint, I've been coaching pre-seed and really nascent companies. I think right now the appetite is to really have AI that's native and not a wrapper, because the solution needs to be needs to evolve over time. So if you have a wrapper, you're going to be completely obsolete, and you're going to lose ground in the dust pretty quickly. Just to go back to what you're saying in terms of adoption of the AI, what I've seen being successful in life science is co-creation. So a lot of solutions, I'm going to give you an example from the SHUM Gray Oncology platform to really make sure that patients in radio oncology would get the right instrument, the right technician at the right time. That was put together during the pandemic because we didn't want patients to be exposed to the healthcare system and to come into the clinic. So this is not a platform that's new. It's a platform that was used with Japan Railroad. So a Quebecer sold the platform to the Japanese railroad, but it's a rinse and repeat. You can use a great technology to a system or a place where there's nothing, everything was done by hand. So it was groundbreaking. And when you co-create with healthcare professional, it's easier to export. So to your point, adoption is in health science how you have a product market fit from the get-go, and how you have an AI that's embedded into your solution to make it grow. The flip side of this is what you see with Neuralink, the product and the company from Elon Musk, which is fantastic, helping quadriplegic with their mind, with their tongue, being able to control computer and play games, play video games with people from around the world. This is where we are right now, having something that's breakthrough, that's going to change the life of individuals. What we have to come about is how do we feel about the adoption of this method? It's very invasive. You have to put an implant into the brain. How do you deal with the cost? So how do you give access to these technologies, which are pilot and have grown in terms of usage and have shown their use case and their benefits? It's a little bit like sequencing, the genome sequencing that was super high a few years ago. Now it's like doing a blood test, an LDL, HDL blood test almost. Super affordable, super accessible. So for me, the adoption is oftentimes a matter of time, a matter of trust, a matter of seeing how invasive or easy it is, but to really make sure that the AI at the core is something that can grow with the technology to help patients.
We don't have too much time left, so I want to leave some time for the audience, but I just want to leave off with one more question for all of you. Just looking ahead now. So we talked about impacts, we talked about risks. If we want to accelerate responsible AI development and deployment, what do you feel is missing in terms of collaboration between academia, industry, and the government to really move our ecosystem in Quebec and Canada forward? So I'm going to open it up to the group.
I just want to start the ball rolling here. We're super good in Canada to have bright ideas. We're a little bit slower on the trigger to put the dollars to support these bright ideas. So this is very Canadian-ish. There's a change right now so that people work bras dessus, closer to support these bright minds and these young entrepreneurs. We have a lot of way to go. Having credits at the provincial levels to support angel investors and different types of investors to really support the ecosystem. So money needs to be there, collaboration with the investors, but also making sure that we can grow these solutions before they get snatched by the others. Because we create a lot here, but people buy a lot from us. Currency exchange rate is in their favor, and also because they want to have a baked-in solution. When I was in pharma, we used to buy 6 to 9 companies per year. When I was at Celgene, companies are growing inorganically by M&A, acquiring smaller companies because they don't have the skill sets or the bandwidth. This is right now how companies are growing in different spheres in life science, by acquiring talent, acquiring the team, or acquiring the technology. Montreal is une pépite de développement incredible. So we should be proud of that, but I think there's a flip side of that as well, in terms of how do we grow our knowledge base to create more wealth and more contribution.
Tristan?
Yes, maybe to build on that, I think streamlining the infrastructure to reach clinical trials of AI solution is also something important and often overlooked. Building on your previous point about evaluation, I think if we're serious about deploying AI technology in healthcare, there's no way around at some point doing a clinical trial. So supporting this pipeline, there's a few things that we're doing in that direction at CAMH, but I think is important to get the technology actually used in the clinical space.
Anyone else want to chime in here? Okay, so I'll open it up to the audience to see if they have any questions, either in the room or online.
For those of you in the audience, if you could raise your hand, I'll bring this microphone to you if you have a question. And just a reminder to those online, if you have a question, feel free to pop them into the chat and we will read them out. So does anyone here have a question? Excellent, one at the front.
Charlie?
Thank you. So my name is Charlie. I work at District 3 as well. I'm the program manager, so one of Karina's colleagues. And I was wondering, Manon, specifically what you mentioned about like we develop things in Canada and then, I feel like we often lose them. We're a massive training center for US companies in Canada. We generate IP that gets sucked up by, other places. I'm wondering, as an incubator for us, but also with your experience at the Creative Destruction Lab, like what are some of the ways beyond government funding that we could support people to want to stay here, to want to invest in Canada, build in Canada, even helping researchers think of themselves as being more, willing to play that game and not just the publishing game?
So what I've seen that's been super successful in the US and in Germany, Germany is a leader in AI and digital health, is growing and maturing companies within. So you must know Flagship Pioneering in Boston. So 25 years of existence. Noubar Finian is a Montrealer, did his engineering at McGill, went to MIT, never came back. But what they've done, which is fantastic, is putting bright ideas, bright minds, surround them with operators, people like you and I that have seen success, to really make sure that the team is fuller. Because from an investor, if I put my investor hat, whenever we put money and dollar into a company, it's mainly on the founders, it's on the human capital. Because the solution can always pivot. In biotech, it's a little harder, because if you hit your milestones, you have to go back to square one. But if you have a SaaS solution, you can always tweak it. So for me, if we are to be able to bring more value in the ecosystem, we have to surround these bright minds which have never commercialized, help them put the money, put the capital in different amounts, but give them the human capital to grow quicker. So that would be one thing. What I've seen also in different parts of the world is how can you have strategic collaborating with you? If you think about Merck Digital Studio, we have now a chapter in Montreal at AXI. So how can you collaborate with these groups to be getting capital, but also to be getting a way in? Because when you think about a startup, you need to have an exit strategy for investors to invest in you. If it's a lifestyle, people are not going to be investing in you. It defeats the purpose. Go to the bank and get a loan. But if you want to have investors, there's a value proposition in terms of your roadmap. So you have to be true to yourself. If you want to exit at one point, that's fine. If you don't want to exit, it's a really different strategy. And if we want to grow companies, to me, it's capital and it's resources, because we want to bring wealth and create wealth.
Any other questions from the audience? If not, I can also ask another question. So for those that are students, maybe aspiring researchers, aspiring entrepreneurs, do you have any sort of tips, resources, or any skills that they need to acquire if they want to work at this intersection between AI, health, and bio?
I would say remain curious and be on your toes. Things are changing so quickly. It's incredible. We've never seen that before. A company, a SaaS company, could grow and have something that would be meaningful after, let's say, 15 months, 18 months, 24 months. Here, it's a matter of weeks. It's international, it's super fast. So to me, if we are going to be successful, if we are going to make a difference, oftentimes we have to be humble enough to be pairing with other people. So like made here, good here does not exist anymore. There's bright people everywhere. So I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that oftentimes you need to remain curious and go and seek relationships and partnerships with various groups.
I would also say kind of what we're taught at university or whatever is a lot of on the hard skills. I mean, in France, at least it was that. But now, like, the capacity to learn a new skill is becoming so much faster, and you have, like, AI can really help you with that. So I would say maybe focus on the soft skills, the things that make you you, basically. So empathy, critical thinking, trying to look, like, outside, look what's happening in the world. It can really bring ideas to mind, and then you can focus on building a solution for that. But the hard skills are, you can always acquire them, but the soft skills are really what matter.
Absolutely. Right?
Ask yourself if what you're doing is the right thing. You aren't necessarily going to have a simple answer to that, but as much as obviously these technologies have the capacity to improve people's lives, they also do come with real risks. And for a very long time in science, obviously, I'm not Canadian, so I'm speaking from a slightly different perspective maybe, but for a very long time, especially in computer science, we have ignored this question. Or we've kind of been like, yeah, I mean, we were thinking about ethics a little bit, but we're still, there's a lot of forefronting of profits and wealth and capitalism. And yeah, we all live in capitalism, but I think it's really important to ask, you know, if I want to make this, am I accelerating this for a reason that is right? Do I really want to help people, or am I just trying to go fast to go fast? Like, you have to take a step back. You have to have that moral compass. It's so important. And I say this as somebody who did a postdoc appointment at Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is the site of the atomic bomb, right? And the physics. And so in physics, we had that moral reckoning. I don't know if people listen to it anymore, but there was a reckoning when people realized what they'd done. And I worry sometimes that in computer science, we're barreling towards, you know, a Hiroshima, Nagasaki moment, and people aren't stopping to think about it.
Paula, if you have anything to add, or Tristan? Oh, we have a question from the audience, so many questions now. I think that opened a whole can of worms.
Yeah, we have some, we even have one online too.
Wonderful.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say we have time, I think, for about one more question.
Perfect.
And we'll take that from the audience here. For those of you online, if you have your question, please type it into the chat and I'll make sure I can get it to those panelists after the fact. Thank you.
And so to close, we're sitting in a university, and while I've heard about, you know, questioning personal motivations and bolstering curiosity, at the same time, within the context of an academic institution, what needs to be put in place to go beyond basic subject training into much more integrated training that includes, among other things, you know, perhaps more interactions with industry and more interactions between different disciplines?
I like this question because I feel that the curriculum at the university level is building nowadays much more than when I did my undergrad and my grad schools, much more about building the skill sets of the future. The soft skill set, I completely agree with you, because as human beings, we need to have that. That's going to give us an edge all the time. To me, universities are better set for success, but we have to think about the curriculum or the journey of a student. When we think about primary school, secondary school, and CEGEP, are we building our kids, are we building our future generation for success, or are we pivoting and peppering nice innovation perhaps too late in the game? Why do we have curriculum which are so strict, and why don't we have a place where people with their colors, their preferences would build a curriculum that's a little bit more tailored? Some groups around the world have been doing that. I was with the French delegation at Bio in San Diego 2 years ago, and Illumina, which is a very well-known company, is sitting down with the universities in California 4 times a year. The universities and the large corporations are sitting down, and universities want to know what are the skill sets that you need for your long-range plan. Are we doing that in Montreal? We should.
A couple of things, I think. So first of all, the university is really not set up, like this one at least, is not set up for interdisciplinary work. It's very hard to work even across departments, and it's nigh impossible to work across faculties. And I think that's just a case where we need to change some of the administrative structures. I don't necessarily know the right way to do that, but they are a huge barrier to that kind of interdisciplinary work. And I think in that vein, you know, profs are great. We're really important. We have great ideas, but we need more administrative support for a lot of the things that we're not taught to do. We're not taught to manage finances. We're not taught to manage teams. You know, we need more people supporting us who are experts in that, more ways to grow some of those skills ourselves so that we can pass them on to our students. Because if we don't know how to do it, you can bet our students aren't going to know either.
Paula and Tristan want to add a final remark before we
Maybe a
close.
quick thing on this topic, just to preach for my own choir, but I think the role of academic hospitals in this ecosystem is important. So, you know, encouraging students or anyone interested in health research in, you know, partnering with, so in Montreal, places like Saint-Justine, CHUM, a few other ones, KMH in Toronto, I think is really a place where this interdisciplinary work can effectively happen. So.
Well, thank you so much to all the panelists. This concludes our discussion today. So let's give a big round of applause. I believe there's a short break now, and so those who had questions, maybe you can quickly ask the panelists.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone who came into this space today. Thank you to those online who are listening in. We're going to go ahead, close up the live stream now, but we'll keep the Zoom open as we're going to pivot into some poster presentation lightning rounds and then workshops later on. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you after a short break.